Hello everyone. Today we are going to start our geology unit, and hopefully from unit 1 you remember what geology is. But if you don't, then maybe you will remember what geo means. Geo equals earth. So whenever you see that prefix, you need to think earth. And when we think of the earth in this way, we specifically are talking about the core, the mantle, and then the crust. So with geology, we're going to look at the forces that shape the earth, and it's going to involve the core, mantle, and crust. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, a rock is simply a solid mass of minerals or mineral-like matter that occurs naturally. So rocks are made up of minerals. That's basically what the statement is telling you. Rocks are solid, we know that. We don't have, liquid rocks that look like water. They're all solid materials made out of minerals, and they're forming naturally within the earth. That is what is going to end up making it a rock. Now, there are 3 types of rock: igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. We're going to look at each of those individually, and hopefully this is all just review for you because I know you talked about it in middle school. So as we look at the rock cycle today, hopefully a lot of this is just a reminder, a flashback to back in the day when you learned about this. But we're going to look at some keywords with the 3 types of rocks. Now, I do want to point out there's many names of rocks. The 3 types, igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic, are just like the big families of them, but under each of those there's subgroups. I remember when I took geology in college, one of the tests for our labs was they got a trash can full of rocks, dumped them out on our desk, and we had to name each of them individually. And we couldn't just say sedimentary, igneous, metamorphic. We had to give their specific name, as well as all the features of the rock that told us exactly what it was, like what type of granite it was. And then we had to write all those out. It was I spent many days studying flashcards of rocks. I'm not going to be evil and do that to y'all, although that is an idea, maybe for extra credit. But those are the 3 types of rocks. But again, there are many types that fall under those categories. So let's go ahead and look at them. Well, before we do that, there's a couple of vocabulary words. So write down this whole slide. I know only a couple words are bolded, but that's because I combined vocab words. There's 4 words total, but they are so related that I just made it into 2 sentences. So magma is your first word. This is molted rock, and molted just means melted. So make sure you know what molted means because it's probably what you'll end up seeing on test. But magma is molted rock, and so is lava. They're both molten rock. The difference is magma is above the surface. So it's above the surface, under the surface, while lava is above. So lava equals above surface, and magma equals under the surface. So when you have molten rock underground, we call it magma. And once that molten rock hits the ground, the surface, that's when we call it lava. So inside of a volcano, we have magma. Once the volcano erupts, we have lava. So magma under the ground, lava above the ground. Our next 2 vocabulary words is going to be weathering and erosion. So weathering is the breaking of rocks, and sediment is when they're broken into pieces. So sediment is just the broken up rocks. So you can think of sand as like sediment. When weathering is the actual breaking up process. So if a rock is being broken up into teeny tiny little pieces, we would say that rock is being weathered, aka it's being broken. With those little teeny tiny pieces that remain, those are the sediments. So rocks are weathered into sediment. And magma reaches the surface, becoming lava. Kind of the 2 things. So make sure you do know the difference about them. As we talk about the rock cycle, we are going to talk about both of those, or all 4 of those words throughout it. So you do need to have a good understanding of it. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the slide and move on. Let's first look at igneous rocks. So make sure you write down igneous rocks, and I'm going to tell you some keywords. And these keywords are words that you have to know. Anytime I tell you what keywords are, you should be writing them down. You should be underlining them. You should be making a note, a star next to them every single time because they're very, very important. Otherwise, I wouldn't stress them, and otherwise, they wouldn't be called keywords. But especially with these rocks, I am going to be asking you specifically what their keywords are, so make sure that you know them. So igneous rocks are rocks that form when lava or magma cools and hardens. Cools and hardens are the keywords. So anytime you see them describing a process or talking about a type of rock, if they say it cools and hardens, you instantly know that it is an igneous rock. That's the process that goes on in creating them. So magma cools and hardens, or if it's lava, that cools and hardens. But basically, molten rock cooling and hardening is going to be what creates your igneous rocks. There are two types of igneous rocks. The first one is an intrusive igneous rock. Intrusive igneous rocks occur within the earth. So intrusive starts with IN, so they occur within the earth. So that's what this is saying. They crystallize below, aka in the earth, and because they are cooling and hardening inside of the earth, they cool very slowly. Because think about this magma that is buried within the earth. It's very insulated, so it's going to take it a long time to cool off because it doesn't have any air reaching it. And so because it's cooling so slowly, it will create large crystals. Crystals need time to develop. They need time to grow. So the slower this rock is cooling, the more it is allowing for crystals to occur, and the larger the crystals are able to grow. So intrusive igneous rocks occur in the earth, and because they're occurring in the earth, they cool slowly, creating the large crystals. Your second igneous rock is extrusive igneous rocks. This is when magma exits the earth, aka it becomes lava. So it exits the earth, and on the surface is going to cool very quickly. And because it's cooling so quickly, it's only going to allow small crystals to form. So you have this lava that's onto the earth. The air is able to reach it. The air is able to aid in cooling it off, which is why it cools so quickly. But because it's cooling so quickly, these crystals are not able to grow. So those are your two types of igneous rock, intrusive and extrusive. So I'll give y'all a second to finish writing that down, and then I will move on. Next slide just has pictures. So here is your extrusive igneous rock formation. You can see the lava has gone up and it's exited onto the surface, so that would be the lava. Here you have the magma within the earth that's cooling and hardening. Your extrusive one is forming this rock down here. And as you can see, you can't see any crystals within it. The intrusive igneous rock that formed much slower, cooled much slower, you can see the chunks of crystal that are within that rock. So there's the differences in your intrusive and your extrusive igneous rocks. Okay, metamorphic rocks. So metamorphic rocks form when sediments are buried and undergo extreme heat and pressure. So your keywords for metamorphic rocks are heat and pressure. Make sure you know them. So igneous rocks are when things cool and harden, and then metamorphic rocks are when you have extreme heat and pressure. Now typically you have a lot of pressure because the sediment is often buried, and the further below the surface you go, the more pressure you're going to occur. The closer to the mantle you get, you're also going to have more heat as well. However, notice this is not enough heat to melt the rocks, because if the rocks were actually being melted, they would have to cool and harden, which would therefore make them igneous. So these aren't melting, they are simply having a lot of heat that's right before that melting point, but that's enough to help them to change. So with all that heat and pressure, they then become a metamorphic rock. If more heat was added, that's what could make it melt, and then it would become magma or lava, and then it would have to cool and harden, but that would make it igneous. So there's your metamorphic rocks, and there's a picture of your metamorphic rock, or a particular metamorphic rock as well. And if I still remembered all that stuff from geology, I'd tell you the name of it, but that information is long gone. I think I took that class in 2010, so I've not exactly been naming rocks ever since then. Okay, so I'm going to clear the screen. Hopefully you're done writing that down, Again, make sure you are making note of keywords. If not, it's just going to drive me absolutely crazy. Okay, clearing the slide and moving to the next one. Now we have our last type of rock, and this is sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks are made up of sediments. And remember, what are sediments? Sediments are broken up pieces of rock. So this is when you have a rock that was weathered down or broken down, and it became little teeny tiny sediments. Those sediments were compacted and cemented together, creating a sedimentary rock. So the two key words are compacted and cemented together. And here you have a picture of a bunch of different types of sedimentary rocks. Some of them, especially like in this one, you can see how grainy they look. If you just imagine that you have a bunch of sand in your hand and you could squeeze that sand together, compacting it, and then that pressure would cause it to cement together, that would be your sedimentary rock. And it would just be a bunch of clumped up pieces of sand. This red one down here, you can see the layers within it. This is typically what you see a lot with mountainsides or cliffs. You would have a layer of your rock and your sand and dirt, stuff like that. And over time, you get different layers of that rock and sand that build up. Well, because they keep building up, they get very compacted because gravity pulls things down, and they eventually cement together, and that's what gives you those different layers within those rocks. So sedimentary, compacted, and cemented together. And that's going to work very closely with weathering and erosion, while magma and lava work very closely with your igneous rocks, because that has to do with cooling and hardening. Okay, I'm going to clear the slide and move on because we have a lab today. Yay! And the lab involves food. So that's always exciting. Okay, next, the rock cycle. The rock cycle is a continuous process. It's constantly occurring, and it does not go in a circle. Your rock cycle is simply one rock changing to another type of rock. So one rock changing from one form to another. That's all it is. And it's not a perfect circle. It doesn't have to go igneous rock to a sedimentary rock to a metamorphic rock, and then back to an igneous rock, and then to a sedimentary rock, and so on and so on and so on. It is not a circle. Notice these arrows go every which way. If you're a rock, you could be an igneous rock that is turned into a metamorphic rock, that then goes back to igneous, that then goes back to metamorphic, then back to igneous, then back to metamorphic, then to sedimentary, then to igneous, then to sedimentary, then to metamorphic. It doesn't matter. You can go in any direction that you want. It's not a set pathway. If you're a rock, you could be a igneous rock for, 1,000,000 years and then become a metamorphic rock and then go back to igneous rock for another 1,000,000 years. It just depends on the conditions that are around the rock. So notice all the arrows are talking about the different processes. So we said that igneous rocks cool and harden. Well, notice you have magma that is cooling, that was pointing to your igneous rock. After that magma cools, it will therefore harden, creating your igneous rock. Notice that in order for this igneous rock to turn into a sedimentary rock, first it has to be weathered, aka broken down. We know broken bits of a rock are what we call sediment, and that when sediment is compacted and cemented together, it becomes a sedimentary rock. What's the keywords for metamorphic rock? Heat and pressure. Well, notice every arrow pointing to a metamorphic rock says heat and pressure. So that's why those keywords are so important, because you could get a diagram like this, and it doesn't have to be set up this way, but a diagram similar to this where they will leave blanks, and they can either leave a rock name blank or an arrow blank or any part of it blank, really. And you would have to fill in what goes where. So it's important to know those keywords and those processes so that you can easily fill in the gaps. They also could just describe to you something that occurred and then get you to explain the type of rock or tell the process that was occurring. So there's lots of ways they can ask questions about this, and the keywords are the one thing that's going to stay consistent no matter what.